What's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a global economic thriller, China's debt crisis. Countries are on the brink, and China might hold the key. Is it a recipe for disaster or a manageable situation? Buckle up, because we're about to uncover the truth behind the headlines. We'll break down China's international loans, explore why some countries are going bankrupt, and most importantly, what it all means for the global economy. Will this be a domino effect or a controlled tumble? Hit that like button and subscribe to stay in the know. This is going to be an episode you don't want to miss. From rags to riches and rags again. How did one of the biggest economies of the world come so close to losing it all? The lifeline of a large number of developing nations is now in deep water themselves. Over the past decade, China's debt has risen dramatically and raised red flags. After lending money all over the globe, the mountain of debt threatens to fall onto China and wreak havoc on its economy. With things starting to look grim, is there still a way out, or are things doomed for the struggling superpower? Stay tuned to find out what's the problem. How can a country that gives out so many loans be in debt? It seems like a contradiction, but after years of giving out loans and being the lifeline to so many nations on the brink of economic collapse, China seems to be standing in a similar spot. China has been a spearhead for economic development all over the world. The inauguration of Sri Lanka's Colombo port city in 2014, attended by Chinese President Xi Jinping, was seen as a symbol of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. The $15 billion project aimed to build a high-tech offshore financial center with a marina, hotels and luxury homes on reclaimed land, and was praised as a major hub of the 21st century maritime Silk Road. However, in August 2022, Sri Lanka is seeing a bailout from the International Monetary Fund after defaulting on its debt, and Pakistan is also undergoing an IMF bailout, while many other Belt and Road countries are struggling with debt distress. The question arises of China's responsibility for the situation and how it will respond, suggesting that the outcome in Sri Lanka will be a critical test of China's willingness to cooperate with other lenders and potentially revise its geostrategic goal. Despite all this, China's economic strategy is starting to show fault lines. With the world slowly trying to recover from COVID and amidst the Ukrainian conflict, as well as widespread inflation, adjusting to these new increasingly difficult circumstances is starting to prove a challenge to China. With the situation getting worse in emerging markets, China's debt problem becomes twofold. It not only has to deal with its internal credit problems, but also bears the burden of the country's very first international debt crisis. Over the past 2 decades, China became a huge lender to developing countries, and as of 2022, 74 of the poorest nations in the world were all eating from China's plate. These countries have debt service obligations estimating $35 billion, and a third of that amount was owed to China. As per a 2021 report by the Peterson Institute for International Economics, China makes up nearly 50% of all the debt that poor countries owe to official creditors. The economic situation of China seems to be a delicate balancing act at the moment, with strong winds threatening to disrupt the balance and topple the system over. What impact does this have? Debt problems don't just go away. China, the world's largest government creditor to tons of developing nations, will have to make drastic changes to steer away from its international debt crisis. The first step towards tackling this problem will be restructuring debt to multiple countries across the world simultaneously. The IMF is getting involved, and finding a solution to this problem is the top of its agenda for future meetings. Beijing, along with its fellow lenders in the Paris Club, is joining hands to offer relief to Zambia. Same relief packages, and the formula is intended to apply to other low-income and developing nations. However, this time, things will have to be different. China's new domestic policies, which include various powerful banks and competing local ministries, will have caused a delay in the debt relief being rolled out. China has started to look out for itself, with financial officials and economic experts not so thrilled with the idea of wasting public money on debt relief. On the other hand, the foreign ministry has other things to worry about. Chief among them is China's strong image internationally, making them tilt towards restructuring debt. This financial crisis will inevitably have a large-scale international impact, with developing nations taking the blow. If things escalate, China will be forced to reduce its overseas lending activities, which could cause a big dent in the economies of countries reliant on this aid. This concern is already in motion, as Chinese lending flows have seen a steep decline since 2020. This decrease is most likely due to the increasing problems in the loan portfolio, with officials sugarcoating the wide margin. The real estimate is somewhere around 60% of China's sovereign loans being provided to countries in the face of some major financial distress. The number of countries facing debt servicing issues has continued to rise. Sri Lanka and Zambia have already defaulted on their loans, and their economies find themselves in the pitfalls of a recession. Despite having made agreements with the IMF, things cannot be finalized until the debt these nations have is made sustainable. With unsustainable debt levels, the IMF cannot approve loans until all creditors agree to restructure. Here is where China's economic concerns prevent it from okaying such a measure. Countries like Tunisia are unable to meet their budget without bond financing from overseas. Ghana is burdened with a heavy debt load and is forced to skyrocket its interest rate to make ends meet. Pakistan, which has been hit by devastating floods, finds itself in deep waters with only a month of foreign exchange reserves, levels which are considered alarming and unsustainable. It's concerning to see the impact of China having to pull itself out of other countries' economies without the situation even being too bad. Imagine the international economic devastation if things were to slip out of control. Another important player in this entire situation is Chinese banks. These, including the People's Bank of China, are holders of a large number of U.S. Treasury bonds, the secret weapon and reserve in which China's wealth is invested. In the case of a domestic emergency, the finance ministries may have to make a call to sell these bonds. While the economy has not reached the point where its reserves need to be sold, things have started to slow down significantly. Chinese banks haven't purchased as many U.S. Treasury bonds since 2015. If push comes to shove and reserve bonds are to be sold, the impact on the market could be huge, but at a temporary hitch in the road at best. Things could take a turn for the worse if a Chinese bank has to declare bankruptcy. China's 4 largest banks are global, systematically important financial institutions, as declared by the Financial Stability Board. However, this circumstance isn't seen as very likely, as large banks within China are strongly supervised and bankruptcy is only possible in the case of gross negligence and a major accident. Problems will most likely be faced by smaller banks with larger ones escaping such a fate. China will also need to keep an eye out for its currency liquidity. During the global financial crisis, the US dollar lost its liquidity as banks slammed the brakes on lending to each other after the Lehman default incident. Liquidity issues were faced by banks that relied heavily on interbank markets for financing, which in some extreme cases led to financial default. The dollar suffered internationally. If China isn't careful, it's staring down the same fate. While there are many direct impacts to be afraid of, there are several hidden concerns that the Chinese government should look out for. A global impact is to be expected if China goes into a recessive state, and economic troubles are to be expected across the globe, from the disorganization of logistic trails and supply chains to a sudden reduce in demand for foreign goods and services. Things will take a hit. Countries heavily reliant on Chinese tourists and students can expect to see a steep decline in Chinese citizens partaking in these sectors. With things taking a hit post-COVID, the chasm can only be expected to widen if the problem isn't nipped in the bud. Summing it up, the world of economics and the circle of international debt is a complex balancing act. With one step in the wrong direction and one piece out of place, things can come crashing down. If China is unable to manage its debt situation and return to its position as the big brother of the financial world, things might take a turn for the worse, much worse. If you want to keep in touch with things happening around the world, subscribe to our channel. If you like what you saw, feel free to leave a like and stay tuned for more. That was a complex issue. So what are your thoughts? Is China's debt a ticking time bomb, or can they manage it? Leave a comment below and let's get a discussion going. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth explorations of the global economy. We tackle the big questions and keep it real. And hey, if you enjoyed this, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you down the road.